Hello, so in this video I'm going to talk about arrays. Let's open up Visual Studio and have a look at some Python code here. So arrays, what's an array? So an array is a type of variable in which you can store multiple values of the same data type. So here I've got an example just to show you. So I've got 4 variables here, integers, assigning values to 4 integers to 4 variables here, printing out the 4 variables, and then I've got an equivalent for you to compare how these work. So we've got a single variable that stores 4 integers within that single variable. Okay, so it's important to say we need to include this array module at the top. Once we've done that, then we can use this class here called array. So here, setting up this class will return a variable of type integer. Here, this lowercase I means assigned integer, so plus minus integer, and we can set up the variable with 4 values here. So if I put a breakpoint just here by clicking in this border and start running this code, right. Okay, so I'm printing out my 4 variables, 1, 4, 9, 16. And now if I click this button here to step through my code, you can see here setting up the array variable squares, printing out, and it shows me here the contents of that variable. Type integer. Note that the type of the elements are all the same, all integers. Okay, I can then do useful things with arrays. Arrays are very important in coding. We keep lists of many things. We could have an array of records from a table in a database. We could have an array of objects in a game, so characters or sprites or particular elements in a game. We could have 3D space, X, Y, Z coordinates in 3D space, which we'd maintain in an array and manipulate the values, the contents of that array within our code. Okay, so for example here we can use this append function or method against this variable that we've created, squares. So here, 4 elements in our array, append another element and give it value 25. So let's see what happens if I execute that and then print. So you can see here added 25 to my array there. Okay, various things we can do. We can iterate through each element of the squares array using the for loop here, and we've got this sq loop variable, and it'll basically when we iterate through the squares variable, we'll print out each element, so the content of each element in this print statement. So I'll just quickly step through those, and you can see here on the right we've got 1, 4, 9, etc. going to 25. Okay, and now we can also refer to each element within the array using its index, its place, its ordinal value in the list, or the array. Okay, note starts at 0, and the element, the final element, is in here, element number 4. The length of the array is 5, so it goes from 0 to length of array -1. So if I now print these, okay, we've got here 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. So we can print out each element content based on the index. We can use the form of the for loop here, looping from an integer I to length of the array -1. Okay, we don't write -1 here. This if we just use the single parameter here, the single argument length of squares, it'll loop from I equals 0 to I equals this length -1. Okay, and we can see this if we run this now. So printing out I, and notice the first value is 0 and the final one is 4, and okay, I've got a little calculation here. I'm multiplying I plus 1, so the first time is 1 by the contents of the array. So I'm finding the cubes now. Okay, just to show you, we can create other arrays with different data types. This is a Unicode single character array, and we can print this lot out. So the array is this type, Unicode A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and you see the length is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the elements will go from 0, the indices will be 0 to 5. Okay, let's have a look at lists, because these are, in Python, these are more useful than arrays. Because if you remember an array, all the elements are the same type. In a list, have a look at this. This is a list, py equals, and we have 3 elements here, but notice they are all different types. String, integer, decimal here. Okay, just going back here, so I'm creating 4 variables with coding languages, just to show the comparison of working with individual variables against this list here. So very similar to an array, we've got a list of these strings. Print that out, and you can see here on the right we have the list, very much like an array, isn't it? And the length of it is 4, and look, the indices work in the same way. So the first element is at index number 1, position number 0 rather, 0, 1, 2, 3. So this final one is length -1. Okay, so that's our lang array. So Python here, py, I have a list with different types there. And notice now I've got a list, and each element within the list is another list. So I've got 4 elements, and each element contains a list of 3 elements. So if I print that out, prints out the contents, and now look, we can loop through this 2-dimensional list. So we can think of it, you can think of it like 4 rows, and each row has 3 columns. And so here we're looping through the rows. So I'm using this form of the for loop. So for each element within langs here, I'm calling it lng, print out lng. So first element will be this, won't it? Python 1963 29.93, which we see here. And then for this lng, I'm going to loop through the individual elements of this list. So I'm saying for L. So I'm just making up a variable name here. This then becomes a loop variable that just exists while this loop is running. Once we get here, L and lng will no longer exist. We can see here down, I've got my list of locals. lng is here. Should disappear after we've exited this loop. Right, let's click through. Right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to run up until run to cursor there, Control F8 would do it. So you can see here, running this loop within a loop, I'm displaying the individual elements of the Langs list, and then within each element of that list, the second dimension of elements. Right, you see that. Similarly, we can index. We can use an index number, so 1 to length of Langs minus 1. If we just run this, you can see here we've got the outer loop. So outer index 0, and then I is incrementing 0, 1, 2, and there'll be one more. And so I is looping from 0 to 3, and then for each of the elements retrieved from Langs, we are looping from 0 to the length of the list in that element minus 1, and printing out this further indented inner index j. Outer one's I, inner one is j. Okay, so you can see here there's each element of Langs, and then within each of those we are printing out the element number. So the element contents rather, and the element number here. So you can see here a brief introduction in how we refer to and manipulate arrays. Okay, so this from array needed to work with arrays. If we're working with lists, which is kind of more common really, you don't need this bit. Okay, just a quick thing to mention Numpy. If I view Solution Explorer and show you this, so Numpy, you can use the Numpy package and the array module within that, and you can, this is Numpy numeric Python, I believe, and you can do some interesting sort of shortcutty numerical manipulations. So set up an array here, print this, and then say create a new array based on the array divided by 2. That's going to divide, that's going to take each element and divide each element's value by 2. If I just set this as my startup file, and actually let me finish this up and set this one as my startup file and run. You can see here, print that array and print the array divided by 2, and we've got the numbers divided by 2. Need to do a bit of formatting here, I think, to display these properly, but you can see the numbers. Okay, with Numpy you do need to install it, install Numpy, and let's see, I had to do this lot to install Numpy on my machine. So, but sort of thing you can Google. You can take a sort of screenshot of this if you don't have it set up on your machine. All right, so that's Python. A quick look at VB. So let me actually close the Python one there. Right, so quite a similar thing. We can create arrays here. This is an array of strings. Okay, we can work with lists. Lists kind of easy to work with really. And I've got an example here of a 2-dimensional array. So we need to, this is sort of thing you Google really just to see what the syntax is, or you look at your reference book to find out what the syntax is for setting up a 2-dimensional array. Here I've got an array car countries 2 where I specify how many elements are in each dimension, so it's a 2-dimensional array, but I haven't initialized it with values. So it's possibly worth running this, isn't it? I'll just put a breakpoint here, and let's have a look at the output. So let's see what it's doing. So here I'm using that for loop. My loop variable here will be in Visual Basic. I need to be specific and say it's a string. So this loop variable will just exist within the execution of this loop. And here I'm writing the element, each element that's within the cars array here. So if I step through here, we'll see the individual contents of the individual elements. Here I can refer to the index of each element, looping from 0. In Visual Basic I have to be specific about the value that I'm looping to, so as opposed to in the Python there where we put cars.length as our end of range. So again, I will list Volvo, BMW, etc. because I'm referencing the element using its index number. Okay, now if I want to extend the array, the cars array, and say I want another element, I have to re-dimension, I have to redeclare it and use this preserve keyword to say that I want to preserve the values that are in the array already. And now I extend it from a 4-element array to a 5-element array, and I'm saying the again the element numbers 0 to length -1, so that final element will be index number 4. So I'll put Fiat in there, and now I do this loop again, and I will find I have 5 elements with Fiat in the final one. Okay, lists are quite nice to work with. I can use the append. I don't need to do a redim preserve. So I've got my car list. Notice I need to use this new keyword here because I'm working with I'm running the constructor of a class, which we'll see later in the course. So I'm adding elements to my list, or items to my list, and now I can iterate through this list, car list here, using the for each. And now this car will be a string, so that's each item within the list. I created a car countries array here, car countries, and this is 2-dimensional array. So I've got, notice the array, they're all string types. So I've got 3 elements, and within each element I've got a 2 element array. So I've got an array of arrays, a 2-dimensional array. And here you can see I've got countries 2 with the same size. I've got 4. Interesting, that's 3, isn't it? I've done it 4 and 2. No, that's wrong, isn't it? That should be 3 and 2. Okay, not to worry. I'm looping from 0 to 2, this index here, and then referencing car countries. So the outer loop goes from 0 to 2, so that's the 3 elements, and then within each of those I'm looping from 0 to 1, so those 2 elements within each element of this array. So here I'm assigning values to an car countries 2 empty array, and now I can write out the I and j values and then the contents of the car countries 2 array, just to see if it's been written to correctly. And you can see here I've got my outer array looping from 0 1, and then we'll have 2. And my inner loop from 0 to 1. And you can see here, Volvo Sweden, BMW Germany, Mazda Japan, and I didn't do Fiat, did I? Okay, there's a little run through there of how to create arrays and lists in VB. Very quickly on the C#. Oops. So different syntax, something you have to look up. Cars array here, and I use my list class here, which is from this namespace here. I can actually take that out and put it using up here. Oops. And then if I refer to list here, it'll check these namespaces and find list. So array here, list here. Very similar behavior as we saw in the VB. So I've got for each, different syntax. So each element I'm going to call car, it'll exist here. If I just put a breakpoint there and run. Step through the code and write out my cars array. And I've got my local window down here, so I can see if I just expand the cars variable here, you can see it's a variable with 4 elements, indexed from 0 to 3. There's the contents, and I can write out here as well, which you can see over here to the right. The resize, so making the array larger here, so adding another element. I use this array.resize method there. And notice I use the square brackets to identify the elements within the array. And now you can see I've got a fifth element rather, with index number 4 there with Fiat. And I can loop through. Right, and there's my list. If I run to there. So I've got car list now, which I created up here at the top. I've had to use the new keyword to get it initialized and constructed correctly, but it's an empty list. If I expand, nothing there, count 0, count of elements is or items is 0, and now I can add items with each of these statements. So here I'm adding. Here you can see this is my list of locals, and now I can write out my elements here using this car loop variable. You should be able to see car exists here. When I come here, see car exists, it has value Mazda, but as soon as I loop back up here before the next element is fetched, car no longer exists. So this loop variable only exists within the execution of this loop. So no need to declare it as a variable up here. This loop variable is created for each iteration of the array. Okay, I think that is possibly plenty. Only remains to say you can check all this kind of stuff out yourself, really. A bit of Googling. A lot of Google searches will land you at W3 Schools, and we've got Python listed there, Python lists. So everything you need to know about Python there. C# here. Arrays will be here somewhere. If I do a Control F and search for arrays, so you can see, in fact, you can see that I nicked the example from here, can't you? All right, I think that will do for now.